The goal is always to empower the people doing the task and to fill the gaps. It's not to go in there and make more gaps. You know, I've been a manager where a consultant would come in and it's like, wow, I knew I can read before you got here. By the time he or she left, I felt illiterate. Remind me again, who is Amy? I'm so sorry. I didn't meet her.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now it's time to roll back and start the first case.
On this Vendor Spotlight, we will be speaking with Lawayne Perkins, VP of Strategic Partnerships at Advantage Support Services, and you're going to hear him say it. They are not just a staffing company. They are a consulting company with staffing options. And Lawayne is going to paint a whole different picture for their model of supporting healthcare organizations, especially with workforce shortages, maybe, training needs and demands that are just going unmet out there in the industry, Melanie.
Yeah. And as an OR nurse who has dealt with plenty of staffing shortages, and I've interacted with many travelers throughout my career, you might be listening to this and might be a little skeptical about, okay, so your staffing agency and their travelers, how are you really making sure you're giving us the good ones? I mean, I know that's my question. So pay attention because he's going to tell you, and I think you will be very impressed with their approach to staffing and with consulting and everything else that their company does.
All right. Quality is queen, and Lawayne is going to tell us up next. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to First Case.
We are speaking with Lawayne Perkins, VP of Strategic Partnerships with Advantage Support Services. And Lawayne, I see you everywhere. I see you at all the conferences. It's great to be back doing conferences. I'll say that as well, because we had a little hiatus there, but you're doing some really great things there at Advantage, and we're excited to have you on the First Case and Beyond Clean podcast today. We're going to be kind of dual airing this episode, so thanks for coming on.
Justin, Melanie, thank you so much for inviting me. And it's good to be at conferences. Sometimes it feels like we have on inline skates, and we're just ripping across the tarmac, trying to make connections and be impactful. So good to be here. Thanks for the invite. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, what I want to start with is, and you've said this to me in the past, right, is we're not simply a staffing company. We're going to talk through how the company has developed over time, but you do provide a number of staffing options as well as consulting opportunities, both in sterile processing and the operating room, which is why Melanie and I are both on here to join you today. But I thought you could start by talking about your background. Why don't you tell us about your expertise and experience in healthcare?
Absolutely. Well, started off as a technician, right? A medical technician for NYU College of Dentistry, which happens to be the largest dental school in the country. And in that environment, we would sterilize 3,000 12-pound trays every day, right? 3,000 a day. So volume capacity was never an issue. It was what it was, right? Fell in love with the field, really fell in love with the people in the field, cell processing and nursing. And you have to have a certain tempo that allows you to recognize and understand the hum of the department, the hum of your customer. So I learned early on that problem resolution is the area I wanted to be in. and understanding how to resolve a problem, it led me to knowing, well, first comprehend who are the different stakeholders, what types of problems exist, because not all problems are created equally.
Yeah, the solution, the problem might be very similar, but the solution may not always be the same from one place to the next.
Very true. Very true. This is something we have in common with Advanced Support Services. The company was created to solve a problem. Unlike other companies out there, the origin of this facility or this company wasn't in cell processing. It was in the operating room. A group of surgeons was having a hard time with quality in staff, quality in processes, and had to figure out how do we get the best benefit of our time. And in understanding how to get the best benefit of time, you had to address both sides of the house. You had to address the operating room and cell processing. If you do one without the other, you're only providing a halfway solution. So that's what makes Advantage much different than some of the other companies out there. It really is a wheelhouse of services for the operating room and cell processing. And even when you mention the operating room and cell processing, there's also an area in between, those ancillary services for delivery, for inventory management. Fortunately, on the Advantage team, when we say we have subject matter experts who can really support this industry, the proof is in the pudding. From Angela Wellen with a background as an LPN to Jemmy Billingsley, Navy-trained sterile tech, who's one of the premier educators out in our market. So we really have a powerhouse of a team who understands the dynamic that our very first customer is each other. Our second and most important customer will be the operating room. We love to say that our patients are our customers. That sounds really good, but truly the providers are our customers. And we empower the providers, they can then do what they're trained to do to take care of the patients. It's an intrinsic effect. Take care of the patients, you're impacting someone's home and community. So what we do is very, very important.
So Lawayne, you just mentioned, Angela and Jameed, and I've definitely seen Jameed for over a decade speaking at all the regional and national conferences. Maybe Melanie has seen Angela at a lot of the operating room ones. And, how long has the company been around then? Because I've seen them speaking for a good long time. Advanced
Support Services, it's been around for over 25 years. And we're headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. One of our, not the strongest market, but there is a lot of home court advantage, in the state you're founded in. So we'll take that for over 25 years. And the company's growing. We recently announced a strategic partnership with Perioperative Consulting Services, or Inc., under the leadership of Vanjie Dennis and team. So we're super excited about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Melanie knows Vanjie.
I sure do.
So we're super excited because it's almost like, when we're focusing our energies and our attention on cell processing, we now have an A team who can offer those 360 assessments for the operating room, right? And with our full support, any resource, if we have to scale up or down, we can be on site in any place in the country within 1 to 2 weeks, and any amount of resources. So that's been some of our magic. We're always like, how do you have so many resources when the rest of the country is in a hiring desert? Well, I can tell you, here's a little secret. You have to make sure your bench is always ready to jump in. So our reserve players, if you will, our reserve professionals can go toe to toe with the best of them because of our vetting process, Melanie. It's so hard to get a job with Advantage, and that's intentional, right?
Well, you're like reading my mind, I guess, as I know that as a company, it's not just about staffing, but as an OR nurse, staffing is something that is very important to me when it comes to filling the gaps, filling the holes, and who we bring in to help with our day-to-day and help with our caseload and all of that stuff. So I'm curious, you're talking about how great the bench is and the people have been vetted. Can you tell me more about how Advantage as a company makes sure that the professionals that they are sending to the front or putting on the court, to continue the analogy, are really ready to go?
Oh, absolutely. Well, imagine this, you apply for a company, your resume is accepted. And from the moment your resume accepted, comes a trail of skill development. Now, you're not even an employee yet, right? But the moment your resume is accepted, we're now investing in you how to enhance your skill. How do we do that? One measure we do that, if we allow you to take any orientation videos, right, you're going to be compensated, right? We want to make sure you understand your time is valued. So that skill development track begins way before you're even employed by the company. So that's one way. And it's just that improved communication. You know, you're gonna be questioned and interviewed and have a conversation with folks who are doing and have done exactly what you're about to engage in. You know, so it's not gonna be no fluff question. You know, no one's gonna go and say, let me Google 10 emotional intelligence questions to ask, you know, Justin. No, you're gonna be questioned by someone who's been a OR nurse for 10 plus years, you know, who might be interviewing you on her lunch break, right? So that emotional impact is like, hey, you know, I'm here because guess what? I'm interviewing you for a position in my OR, right? So it's a different feel. It's not just, you know, just a general recruiter who speaks excellent English asking you some, you know, run-of-the-mill questions.
Yeah. And then also, you know, if you have resumes or skill checks that just get checked off and people, you know, say they can do everything and they turn in a paper that says they can do whatever. And then you find out later when they get in the OR that they can't. It sounds like this interview with someone who's actually in the OR, an actual OR nurse asking the questions, helps weed out some of those potential oversights or missteps when it comes to people saying they can do things they can't, right?
That would be accurate. You know, I'm doing it ill justice just calling interview. It's an event, right?
Right. Yeah.
By the time it's over, you know, we're going to be saying, oh, you have a birthday tomorrow. You know, can't make sure I get an invite. We really want to invest in the people.
Right.
So one thing I can tell you for sure, anyone and folks who have worked with Advantage, they're still connected to the internal team. Even our customers, even when a contract is finished, Melanie, we always tell our customers, always, right, that once you're part of the Advantage neighborhood, you have any questions, you have an idea you want to run by us, this is free of charge. You know, it's purpose over profit. There's always purpose over profit. We have to continually remind ourselves, why are we here and why do we continue to do what we do, right? And that self-reflection keeps us level, keeps us humble enough to realize that we are still managing our customers. We still practice servant leadership, right? This is what healthcare is about. It's about how can we serve you and make your time and life just a little better to do our part. Because again, in this village, you know, we can enhance someone's day from the moment you walk through the door, or we can ruin it. So we do our best to be intentional.
All of that support then also says that you don't just leave the companies that you're working with or the facilities that you're working with high and dry, and that you're providing support to them as they have people there placed by you so that they can provide feedback or they can ask questions or you can follow up on the people that you place, correct?
Absolutely. Listen, when employees feel supported, right, they want to support more. So one way we support our employees to make sure they have a voice, we do routine surveys. And our team is always filling out a survey to say, well, what could HR have done different or better, right? How can we make sure we understand the cultural differences of what you're experiencing? You know, because not all professions are right for all places. So we do our best to make sure we have a solid fit, understanding Advantages, support services, value proposition, and the hospital's mission statement, right? There's a relationship there that we have to mature. And by maturing that, we have some long lasting, you know, really innovative professionals who can jump in and wear different hats at times.
Trying to match that culture is really, I can see where that could be a piece of the magic or a key to success, because that is not easy to do. And a lot of times, you know, and there's probably clinicians out there or technicians out there that are listening right now that are travelers and have done temporary work for a while. And I bet most of them would say, the only time I really talk with the agency that sent me, you know, out on this assignment is if I've got an issue with payroll or something like that. And, you know, one thing that I've always kind of admired about your model, Lawayne, is the fact that, you know, you talked about the surveys piece, but training and really staying engaged with the people so that they don't, just kind of feel like a body that's connected with you as an agency, but they actually feel part of your team. I think that is really critical. And you really said it. They are going to work better for the hospitals that are utilizing your services if they feel like they're part of something with a bigger vision. And when you talk about putting, people and purpose over profit, I think that is one of the ways that culturally, you get people centered around the mission, and that fits into every culture.
It does. That's a common denominator. And you spoke an unfortunate truth, right? If you were to go to some of these, a lot of technicians like these Facebook groups, because they get to really get raw and exchange notes, you hear a common theme. The only time I hear from my recruiter is when it's time for an extension, ching, more money, or if the customer dialed in a problem. That's totally adverse to what Advantage does. Totally opposite, right? We're giving you a guide for what to expect. We're calling you to make sure, we got the correct scrub sizes. Our team, our home office team is so dialed in that they even taken to the liberty of making sure the hotels, or the temporary housing is suitable for you. You're not getting it anywhere. You're not going to get it's the little stuff that matters, right? But now that we cleared your skill test, you did great. Interview went well. You know your contacts. Now we have to get back down to the basics. How are you as a person? Who do you call when it gets rough? And unfortunately, this last 2 weeks, we have staff members in Florida, so the office was pretty much shut down, just ensuring that our team members, knew what to do, where to go, how to maneuver, because we truly do care.
Well, they're going to be in a situation, just to put this into context too, because we're not exactly sure when this is going to air, but we're just a few hours away from Hurricane Milton making landfall on the west coast of Florida. And you're right. Like, there are people that have to evacuate, and there's going to be staff that have to evacuate, and there's going to be a need to ramp back up on services once, as part of the recovery effort. And there's going to be construction projects because there's going to be damage. Like, this is going to have a really, really big impact. Have you found yourselves kind of in the heart of that from a consulting and staffing side to help navigate through the impact of some of these disasters sometimes?
Yes, to a degree, but we have a ongoing disaster with just staffing and providing professional services nationwide. It hasn't stopped. And one of the ways we respond and why folks call Advantage, and by the way, one of our key terms is make us your first call. And I'll always tell folks, listen, there's a lot of good companies out there, right? I've even worked for a few. So when something comes up, my goal is to let our listeners allow Advantage to be your first call. And if there's not something that we can support you with on, we'll give you referrals someplace else. Because one thing that we hold dear and we're the innovators on is quality assurance. We have a strong focus on maintaining high standards for every area within our grasp. Everything we do is measurable. Whether you have a instrument tracking system, hopefully you do, or you don't. Right? So we're keen on that quality assurance, control, understanding what types of KPIs can be utilized and how they can be operationalized. See, what some folks get it all wrong is it's great you can measure a KPI. It's better if you can interpret it, but you become a superstar when you can make it operational. Once you have that trifecta, now we have tools we can use and leave behind. Advantage is also known for saying we want to leave you the keys. We want to come to your facility, give you the best practices that we know, according not just to AME and ARN, but also according to CMS, to make sure you're always survey ready, patient-centered quality approach to ensure that every member of the team comprehends and know they have a stake in how or what the outcome of this patient's care is going to be. So it is a lot goes into it. And it's so disheartening when you hear sterile processing professionals, undermine their own profession. Like, I only have a job. You do so much more. You can't even, you can't even begin to comprehend how valuable you are to the team as a whole.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, where would we be if we didn't have sterile instruments? I mean, the OR wouldn't run if we didn't have instruments that were sterile. But a bigger thing about what you said that was an interesting takeaway from all of that is that you leave the facility better than you found it. And I don't know of any other consulting and staffing agency that has takes the time to have a vested interest in the overall improvement of the facility where they come. And that, I think, is really something that sets you apart.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. The goal is not to come in and drain your resources. Even when we perform a clinical assessments, and we have a tiered clinical assessment process, so multiple types of clinical assessment depending on the organization and what's the reach. The goal is always to empower the people doing the task and to fill the gaps. It's not to go in there and make more gaps. I've been a manager where a consultant would come in and it's like, wow, I knew I can read before you got here. By the time he or she left, I felt literate. Right? Remind me again, who is Amy? I'm so sorry.
Right.
I didn't meet her.
Lawayne, I'm really getting the strong theme. It's like not a temporary fix, but a long-term solution. And I've heard you say this before, like we're not trying to stay in an ongoing staffing model. So it's just recurring revenue over and over and over because the hospital's not in a position to dig themselves out. And something else that you've talked about is how you also try to support the communities around the hospitals that you're providing services to. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that because it's about sustainable staffing, right? Like not just putting a body to fill an open position, but to also help them figure out ways to fix their own, workforce shortages by leveraging community resources.
Oh, absolutely. I can share, speaking about, Florida, was on the account of Florida, and one of the value adds was like, hey, instead of, just hiring 55 travelers, which we know you can't sustain it over a long period of time, let's see what talent we have in the community. So we constructed what's called a community needs assessment. And this needs assessment, I found myself literally 2 days a week going to every T-Mobile, within this region, just talking to some of the technicians. How you like the job? Any ambition? What are your goals? From this exercise, we were able to hire permanently 12 brand new technicians who have never worked in a hospital before. So during that process,
I've literally never heard of anybody doing that before.
Yeah. It's kind of this where you pull that grassroots out when you really invested in impacting someone's life long term. Give someone a job, great to all the job seekers. I hope you find employment. You give someone a career, it's changing the dynamic of everything they see. Is that one person can now feed possibly a household. The household can be impactful in their community. And we would introduce them to sterile processing 101, right? We would take them hold their hand from step 1 to step 421 for every aspect from decontamination down to sterile storage. Now, 12 made it, 24 didn't make it, right? But the 12 that did make it were empowered to now become mentors to some of their peers who are looking for a path forward in the future.
So immediately two things come to mind. Number one, I think a lot of times human resources may not be really clear on what kind of skill sets and aptitudes and tendencies some candidates have, especially if you're bringing them into an entry level, right? It's a little bit different in surgery, but for sterile processing, especially, if it's an entry level kind of position to begin a career, like how do they even really know what to look for? And then the other challenge is obviously getting them trained up. If they're coming in with no healthcare experience, how do you ramp up 12 new people like that? And how did you know that they had the right skill sets to be successful in those roles?
Well, innovative solutions, right? So, and cautiously approaching, right? You have some folks within that cell processing scope, they are for a short period of time, they're going to be our customer service agent. This because they have such a positive demeanor. They're great note takers. They're detail orientated. This is going to be a person who's going to be calling the OR, checking on room 1. Do you have everything you need for your 6:30 case? If not, let me take a note. Now, this same person may not be, it may not want this guy named Lawayne, putting together that heart tray, right? It may be too complex for him. But the message that's going to be delivered to that operational technician is going to be so detailed, so refined that they'll be able to comprehend the difference between emergency and urgency. What's the difference? How can we determine which path to take? And now we know how to proceed. And Justin, one of the other areas, it's a team effort. So along this path, they already assigned a mentor. They already assigned someone who's already in a position that they're trying to get into.
The difference between emergency and urgency is an excellent takeaway catchphrase from this conversation today. I've never heard anybody say that either. And I think it's really important. Like, we all have urgency in the jobs that we do, but distinguishing between what's an emergency and what's critically important really does change the context and the dynamic of how you work as a team to kind of address that issue or whatever's popping up.
Absolutely. What's cool about that is that our OR staff, our nurses and nurse administrators, they distinguish the difference between urgency and emergency every day of the week. Every day, because they have to. They have to make a decision which patient goes in first, who's going to live and who's going to transition. That's the clearest way to what's urgency and what's emergency if you put it to the highest context, right? So when we dial it down and pull it apart, there's so many lessons to be learned.
Absolutely. So, I'm fascinated at the definitely thinking outside of the box when it comes to finding new people to bring in to staff your sterile processing department. And I know that creativity and thinking translates into the other ways that you bring in travelers and staff and help the facilities that you work with. But there's also a surgical assistant to a first assistant program. Can you talk a little bit about that one too?
Absolutely. We not only do we have programs to train our surgical assistants, we provide interim to permanent surgical assistants. We also have infection prevention training programs, right? So this is where, you have our amazing partners in infection prevention, and they're not strong enough to really transition their skills to monitor and support sterile processing. So this training program gives them step-by-step tools on the who, the what, the why, and the where. And by the time they have won through this curriculum, which is a hybrid curriculum in person and online, they become they're already valuable, but such an additional value aspect in a team member. So we do the same for all of our roles. We've even had some surgical tech training program where we send a surgical tech educator who, imagine this, in your OR, of course, outside the sterile field, monitoring how your surgical tech is passing instrument identification, just a sterile consciousness of what's going on in his or her environment, right? So we have these proctored and these hands-on training programs that are proven to be highly successful. And again, with the goal of leaving you the keys. Here are some tools. Here's someone you can call to interpret the tools. And by the way, if you need us to come back in and have an annual visit, we do that too.
So, Lawayne, another thing is, you really work to find gaps in competency and training. And we kind of talked about how you do that. But it's important, and I want to emphasize this because you alluded to it throughout the entire conversation, that just resume and getting good training doesn't necessarily mean that you have somebody who is competent. And I want to tie this to a white paper or actually you've got a white paper and a case study. I want to tie this particular one to a case study on the impact of untrained staff on the error rates in the operating room and sterile processing. And I'm assuming when you say untrained staff, you're really talking more about the competency side of the house, not just did they get formal training of some type and do they have some experience on their resume, but it's while it's staying untrained, you really mean trained well with competency, don't you?
I do. So the best way, let's talk about this, right? Inadequate training, right? So some new employees may not fully understand the protocols or the systems and that they are going to be responsible for. And even if we provide the most comprehensive onboarding and ongoing training, it can help, but it's not enough. So this is why when we say you could look at that same white paper study and just simply Google it, most mistakes are going to be made by this new group of these green, untrained, rushed microwave, like we like to say, technicians who are put together these surgical sets without being properly trained and no experience. Many hospitals are so short-staffed that they're rushing these folks between disciplines. I come from the school where in order for me to get hired into this department, there was a box of instruments that I had to identify and assemble, rather than just my resume saying I worked in a surgical center. I put together 10 trays a day. What type of trade? Do you understand the differences between values of the instruments? Do you understand the minimum surgical acceptance level within the sterilizer? So many of us tend to forget that sterilization is a science, and science has multiple factors. In order for you to be a scientist, you have to be able to weigh and measure all of the elements that's going to get you to a solution that you can then interpret. So it's important for our listeners to know that I highly recommend that every sterile processing department have an educator on site, right?
Yeah.
Big or small, surgery center.
The ORs have them.
Yeah.
That's why I've always said, it's like, you should be mimicking, that structure to reinforce professional growth and development.
Sometimes we just overlook in the details, rushing through tasks, it may lead to misinformation. So we got to emphasize them.
But with the workforce shortage too, a lot of sterile processing departments are pulling the educators, out to do the work too, right? Like that's another thing that is sort of, difficult. And what happens when you lose a leader in a department, right? Like when you all of a sudden have a leadership gap, how do you fill those, how do you set the organization up for success? So if there is ever turnover like that, you've got a succession plan there. Do you guys work at all on?
We do.
Preparing for that?
Of course, burnout and stress management. This is part of Leadership 101. There are clear signs that your apartment is about to sink, but you can't see the signs if you're disconnected. So one bridge that we always have to continue to build is that connection between sterile processing leadership and middle and upper management. Sterile process leadership and middle upper management. And here's a takeaway, Justin. I tell this to the folks I mentor, right? No matter what your position, a manager, director, or even technician, you want to find the person highest on your organizational chart, or I would tell them the food chain. The person as high as you can go. And that person too may be the person of quality management. It may be the CNO. You want to figure out a way how to approach this person and ask them, can they mentor you? Now, most leaders will be honored to be able to share that culture and that ability to help someone else grow. The moment they say yes, guess what? Your destinies are now aligned. So here's her successes and now your successes. This is how you elevate your own footprint within your surroundings. For our middle and upper management, please look out for those burnout and stress-related indicators, and we have to do better by providing some resources to ensure we have a healthy all-around work environment. And it takes a team approach. This involves human resources. This involves middle and upper management. Interdisciplinary. It's a term that's a hot button, a hot phrase in the industry now. So it works when it's applied.
Well, this interview has been really enlightening, and I definitely appreciate how you're looking to work with, your partners to make sure that they've got a sustainable staffing model and that they have, resources whenever they do find themselves in a situation where they need some consulting, some extra advice, and really just looking at, this issue in the industry holistically. I know you've got a number of different assessments. You have staff assessments, operational efficiency assessments. You talked about the survey readiness assessment. I also want to let everybody know we referenced the leadership preparedness white paper and also the case study on the impact of untrained staff. You can get that by reaching out to Advantage Support Services. You can go to the website, advantagesupportservices.com. You can call them 615-341-6222. And if you do go to the website, they've got a contact form right there on the main page on the right side. And certainly you can request the white paper or the case study, or obviously see about scheduling an assessment for yourself. You can follow Advantage Support Services also on LinkedIn. And Lawayne, I'll let you go ahead and share your own contact information because you're obviously very well connected in the industry and a great resource. And I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Oh, absolutely. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I promise to connect back with you. And again, make Advantage your first call. Consulting services or interim staffing and anything in between. You truly have a friend and a friendly ally in Advantage Support Services. So I look forward to seeing you out on the road. Thanks for the invitation. Great conversation.
Well, we had a great time. And as you said, make Advantage your first call. And that was Lawayne Perkins, VP of Strategic Partnerships from Advantage Support Services. Just a great job today, Melanie. And one of the things that I love about this is, it's not a temporary fix. They're really immersing themselves into reaching out into the community. And there are a lot of hospitals that are looking, and I will say a lot of this is on the sourcing side, but to find local businesses, local resources, and contract locally, because in many cases the healthcare organization is the largest employer in their communities. And I think it's so critical, if you're going to be dealing with workforce shortages and get stood up independently with a real sustainable model, you have got to get out there and recruit. Never heard about anybody going to T-Mobile to find sterile processing technicians. That was new. But one thing that Lawayne forgot to mention that he kind of told us after we stopped recording was that they also help assist in doing job fairs, weekend after hours training for high school seniors. So when they say that they're really not just providing staffing for, a short term and hopefully not a long term need, and really help you as a healthcare organization, solve a problem that I think many are struggling with today. You've got to go to the root cause, and the root cause is the local talent base, the local talent pool. It's just not there. So you've got to create it, having some experts help you identify the right individuals with the right skill sets, and also stand up some training and some competency-based assessments to get them to a place where they can be fully functional employees and begin not a job, but a career. I really love just how they approach their consultative and staffing model.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add to that, because that was pretty all-encompassing, just like their company is. And you said a very important word. They immerse themselves. They don't just drop in, give you a staff person, and then call you again when it's time to renew the contract, but they actually look towards the longevity and health of the facility. And I think that is something that definitely sets them apart, because I've not seen that in any other staffing agency I've worked with before.
Yeah, me neither. So you can follow Advantage Support Services on LinkedIn. You can find Lawayne, again, Lawayne Perkins, Lawayne Perkins, and connect with him on LinkedIn as well. You can visit their website and request any of the white paper or case study, or even an assessment for your organization by going to advantagesupportservices.com. They have a contact the Advantage team form right there on the main page along the right side. And you can also give them a call directly, 615-341-6222. So on behalf of Melanie and myself, thanks for joining us for this vendor spotlight on First Case and Beyond Clean.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to First Case on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for First Case in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. We look forward to hearing from you.